What's going on, guys? I apologize for the delay or the length of time since the last video, but I did have a surgical procedure done. I'm currently healing from that. So just with that said, I just didn't want to be on camera when the way my eye looked last week. But my wife mentioned to me that I did need to get a video put out, so this was a subject I wanted to talk about anyway, because my wife had brought it to my attention. She had mentioned it, and then one of my students had mentioned it, and it was something that was on a Reddit thread that was talking about jiu-jitsu, and it's a subject I just wouldn't mind kind of talking about a little bit. And what it boils down to as far as subject matter is comp jiu-jitsu guy versus hobbyist. So to delineate the difference between the two, it's pretty simple. It's in the name, right? Comp jiu-jitsu guy. It's a guy who considers himself a comp guy or a competitor. He does jiu-jitsu specifically to compete, like that's his passion. Like, you know, he trains jiu-jitsu to compete in jiu-jitsu. He's the sport jiu-jitsu guy. That's another term that I use to describe people like that. On the other side, the people who don't compete are referred to as hobbyists. Now, this is a term that's been around for a while. Actually, when I first started MMA 15 years ago, that was a term we used for anyone who wasn't fighting. So when I came up in the game, when I first started, you had your guys who were training and they were training to fight. And then you had those people who just trained to train because they love it. And those we called hobbyists. And that was just kind of a throwaway term. And I think I didn't think about it for a long time. I actually stopped using it for a while. And I'll explain why here in a minute, but it's been coming up a lot again recently. And let's get back to the whole point that I brought up at the beginning of the video as far as why I made the video. There was a Reddit thread that was discussing, don't quote me guys, I didn't read the thread. This was kind of being relayed to me again by my wife. But I think the guy who put a post was at an open mat. He was rolling with another guy and he tapped him a few times. Now I believe that the guy who was considered the hobbyist was a higher rank than the other guy who considered himself a comp guy. And so the comp jiu-jitsu guy got tapped a few times or once, whatever, he got tapped. At the end of the roll, I guess he stood up, he was a bit dejected and said something to the effect of, I can't believe I got tapped by a hobbyist. Now, to me, there's a bit of hubris behind that, just because you're a competitive jiu-jitsu guy, like you compete on a regular basis, it doesn't mean that your skills are just well above jiu-jitsu practitioners who don't compete regularly or at all, especially if they're higher rank. You don't really know their journey. The hobbyist doesn't know the sport jiu-jitsu guy's journey. You don't know how much this guy trains. And I think that's why I don't use that term anymore. And what I was explaining to my student who was talking to me about it, he's a purple belt. He teaches some of my class. He's a great guy and he's a really good jiu-jitsu guy and a great student. And he's becoming a really good instructor. He said the term gets thrown around a lot when he goes to these open mats and he kind of considers himself a hobbyist. And I said, no, you're not. I don't use that term anymore because at a certain level, I don't consider you doing it as a hobby. I don't consider you a hobbyist. I consider you a martial artist. So you've got your sport jiu-jitsu guy, you got your comp jiu-jitsu guy. Like again, he trains specifically to hone his skills so he can compete. He goes to open mats to challenge himself so he can compete. I'd imagine if he's truly a comp jiu-jitsu guy, that's what it's all about for him. That is his passion. So he trains at least 5 days a week while hitting open mats when he can. He probably puts in multiple sessions a day if he's that guy. And that's because the passion for him is competition. Where I think the disconnect is and where those guys can often be dismissive of what they call hobbyist is they don't view them the same because they somehow imagine that guy's not putting as much work in as them. And that's just not true. Case in point, my student who came to me with this, he trains 5 days a week. When he's not training jiu-jitsu, he's hitting open mats. I mean, honestly, he does 7 days a week because when he's not in class at my school, he's going to open mats at other schools and other gyms. He loves it. He has a passion for it. It is a massive part of his life. And now he's started a kids program at my school and he teaches the kids class, so he's become an instructor. So I would never call him a hobbyist. He is well beyond that. He trains, if you ask me, in a lot of ways, he does jiu-jitsu and trains more than some of these comp guys or sport jiu-jitsu guys. He invests more of himself into it. So his actual passion is for the martial art itself. His passion is for jiu-jitsu. For people like that, their passion is in the art itself. It's in doing jiu-jitsu. They don't feel they need to go compete to get what they need out of the martial art. And I hope that makes sense. And so that's where I'd like to kind of the direction I'd like to push you guys in as far as my thinking is that I consider them both martial artists, absolutely. They are training in a martial art. It's not just in this instance that we're talking about, it's as a whole, the art of jiu-jitsu. Like there's a fracture in the community where there's people who don't want to go to classes, they don't want to do the traditional way of doing jiu-jitsu, they don't like the formality of it, they just want to roll whenever, however, and just learn slick submissions and do all that stuff, and that's fine. And they compete regularly, and and that's what they love doing. And so again, those are comp guys. But don't look at another person who doesn't walk that path, who walks a different path, but trains just as much as you and has just as much of a passion, and maybe even more in the sense that their passion has gone beyond just learning it and applying it. They actually want to teach it. They want to help the community as a whole, because they're not just helping their gym that they teach out of, they're helping the jiu-jitsu community as a whole as growing jiu-jitsu. You don't look at that person as they're beneath you somehow, because again, they're not competing regularly. They're just as skilled as you. Again, because you're both putting in the same amount of time, you're just on different paths. So yeah, I guess that's my take on that whole situation is that, if you like to compete, man, do it. I think you should challenge yourself. And a lot of my martial artists that train in my jiu-jitsu program, they do compete from time to time just to get out there and challenge themselves and see. It's something to work towards. They like doing it a little bit here and there, but it's not paramount to them. It's not the most important thing. The most important thing to them is being a martial artist, is getting good at jiu-jitsu, is just doing BJJ. So yeah, man, if you're a comp guy or a sport jiu-jitsu guy, don't look at people, the martial artists group, like that. They don't look at you like that. You don't hear the martial artists, or what you're still calling hobbyist, look at sport guys and be like, man, I can't believe a sport or comp guy just tapped me. I'm a purple belt. No, not really. They kind of know that comp guys generally do bring a little more aggression. They do bring some tricky stuff you got to be careful of, that because you're a little more fiery, you're a little more driven for competition, so you roll that way. That makes sense. You fight how you train. But I feel like it's just a one-sided hubris, and I could be wrong. So if I am, I am. But start looking at those guys a little differently. Again, if you're a sport jiu-jitsu guy, look at them as martial artists, not hobbyists. If they're there with you at an open mat, and specifically if they have a higher rank than you, then they have put in the time to earn that. Then just respect that they're doing jiu-jitsu just like you are, and they have just as many skills as you do, maybe more given how their time versus yours. So guys, I hope all that makes sense. Again, this was just something that a couple people pointed out to me. I don't spend really any time on Reddit. One of my students said I probably should look at some of that stuff because I can kind of put my finger on the pulse of what's being discussed in the community. So I think Reddit would be another good avenue for me to kind of take a peek at the community. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll keep this thing going. And I'll see you in the next video.